So Valerie and Aurora, we currently have 8 commissioners here, including the 2 of you. So Mila is about to send a document to both of you.
It's a link for a video.
A link for a video. And we're going to start with that. We do know that at least one more commissioner is on their way, so we will be able to have quorum at that point.
Sounds good, thanks.
Or now. we always clap for whoever's number 9, right? Because then we know we can officially start. Let me get the video back up.
I'm 11 years old. A lot of grown-ups think that opportunities exist for all kids, and all we need to do is apply ourselves. But I know that's just not true. It shouldn't matter if you live in the city or suburbs, on a farm or a reservation, or what your zip code may be, but it does. There's still rules to keep our schools separate and unequal. Why? We spend a lot of time talking about whether what someone says or does is racist, but that's not enough. You not liking me for the color of my skin is not the only thing that can affect my chances for success. I'm talking about the built-in barriers that keep me and other kids from reaching our full potential. It's all around us. We might not recognize it, even when it's right under our noses. Like, remember that time I had to start a campaign just to get books in my library about kids who look like me? Do you care enough to look closer, to talk to each other, to your students, to your communities? We've got to change the dialogue. Because when we do, you'll be amazed by all we can accomplish. I'm looking at you.
Well, I think we can get started. Thanks for showing the video. And I think, does everybody have a link to that? Folks want to send it out afterwards. Okay, great, thank you. Welcome. So, let's see. We are officially at quorum. And so the meeting is called to order at 6:38. And Maya, do we have public comment today? No public comment, okay. Great. Okay, so I'm going to do the roll call for attendance. So I'm just going to read through the attendance, or the commission list here. So Margot Berkey, Charna Crump, excuse me. Vanessa Giordano, present. Gary Hill.
Here.
Darby Hickey is excused. Cheryl Hamilton. Mark Hecker.
Valerie Brown.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Valerie Brown to Cheryl Hamilton.
Oh, okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, Mark Hecker.
Here.
Burnell Holland.
Present.
Trevon Kinney. Giselle O'Neill. Here. Walter Peacock. Heather Peeler, myself, present. Anissa Rashid. Here. Maggie Ryden. Margie Siegel. Aurora Steinley. Am I pronouncing your last name correctly? Okay. And Mila
Steinley,
Yoakum.
you got it.
Steinley. And Mila Yoakum. Here. Great. Okay, so the next item is the approval of the agenda. Can I have a motion to approve the agenda?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And on the phone?
Aye. Dora.
Opposed? Okay, the motion carries unanimously. Oh, I said, those abstaining, thank you, I forgot that, Deborah. Any abstentions? Okay, the motion carries with unanimous approval. Okay, approval of the minutes. Everybody should have a copy of the minutes, and they were sent in advance as well. Are there any changes or revisions to the draft minutes? Okay, not hearing any changes. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion to approve.
Okay.
Motion to approve.
Okay, great. Thank you. Can I Gary do the second?
Yes, I
Okay,
second.
great, thank you. Okay, those who approve the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
On the phone?
Aye.
Thank you. Those who oppose, please say aye. Any abstentions? Aye. One, okay, thank you. And so the motion carries with, how many is that? Is that 8? 8.
I'm a non-voting member.
Okay, thank you. All right. Next item is updates in the Office of School-Time Grants and Endowments.
So we're going to keep our updates short. I'm going to actually start with Deborah on the grant competition.
Okay, so the school year 19-20 update. Announcements will be made for the school year grants by the end of July, which is ahead of what last year was when announcements were made in August. The number of applications each competition for school year 19-20. For the OST, we had 39 applications. For the small nonprofit, we had 8. And for the year-round, which is the new competition, we had 24. And we had 77 continuation requests, which breaks down for year, the first year of school year 17-18 would be 23. School year 18-19, their original cohort, there are 37, and small nonprofit, there are 17. 3 organizations did not request continuation grants for a variety of reasons, not programming anymore or changing priorities.
Can I
And-
have
yeah.
one comment related to the announcement? It may be delayed pending what happens with the budget and council approval of the budget. So I just want to put that caution there. We actually cannot make announcements until the budget is approved, even through Congress, the 30 days after.
Summer grant update, there were 4 competitions. There was Summer Strong, small nonprofit, the coordinating entity, and the afternoon enrichment. 64 grants have been awarded to 63 organizations, 20 of which are new grantees. It is a total of $5.31 million in total grants, and the number of slots funded to serve are 5,466 children and youth.
Any questions on the grants? Okay.
You said 64 grants to 63 grantees?
Yes, so one is, one organization has 2 grants, is a coordinating entity and serving at 2 separate sites.
Got it.
What was the number of children?
5,466.
Deborah.
Sure.
Pass it over to Kevin for the Learn 24 conference update and the grant meeting. We'll co-share that.
We'll co-share that one. Thank you. Okay, so last Friday, we had our summer network conference. It was held at the Charles Sumner Museum and Archives. I think we had good attendance. However, it was lower than expected. We actually had 135 folks register with 85 attending, so that's something we still need to focus on, how to improve that component a little bit and get folks attending some of our events such as that. We had 98% folks that said they extremely enjoyed our keynote speaker. Her name was Marcia Tate from Georgia, and Heather was there and got to hear her keynote. And she's an educator for over 40 years and has actually provided workshops and keynotes to over like 500,000 people worldwide. And so I think it hit it on the nose for folks that were there that really enjoyed her literacy workshop. And then she also did one on the 7 habits of highly effective people, right? Yeah, as well. And then just the other thing that I kind of pulled out of there, they liked the location. They felt that it was easy metro and also for parking as well, so that was good to know, being right in the middle of the city right there. And 98% of the attendees indicated that they would definitely extremely come to another conference when it's offered in the future. Just overall with workshops and stuff, everyone seemed like they enjoyed what was offered. And we're still getting some of the evaluations back in as well. So that's conference. Any questions?
Why do you think the attendance was lower than expected or desired?
I'm concerned. I get concerned sometimes. I think one reason is folks like all of a sudden their schedules or competing changes, or there's something at the program level that's causing them last minute not to attend. I think what I want to start doing though is kind of looking to see if there's a trend of the same individuals that'll register and then end up not being a no-show. Something in the future we could look at, which we can't of course right now, is if we did like a small fee or something. And then if they do attend, then actually give them a gift certificate back or something like that as well, like $15, and then give them a gift card back when they do attend, just to maybe have a little bit more accountability in the future. So that's one thought we were kind of passing around. Yep, and the only other thing we're thinking too, we might change the scheduling a little bit and maybe end it with the lunch and use a keynote at the lunchtime, so we don't lose folks at that last workshop, because we do one workshop right after that. And I noticed a lot of folks were leaving a little early too, so let's shake it up a little bit.
Great.
See what we can do to get more folks there as well.
Any other questions related to the conference? And then the update related to the grantee convening. We did our first grantee convening yesterday. We had a lot of events, I'm checking with the team. Yesterday morning, so it was an optional, so it was not mandatory for our grantees both summer and school year to hear more around what the commission is doing, what the office is doing, and sort of some of the reporting and data. So we did a lot of collection of information. We did some really cool activities asking for their input. One of the things that we had, so after the last funding report was released, I spoke with the chairs of the Regs, Children, Youth, and Families Committee. They were interested in the report, but they said, what does the CBOs and those in OST want the philanthropic community to learn from this? So we asked that question to them. We collected a lot of their feedback, so we're processing that still. So by next time, we should have some updates better what the grantees and what the community is saying related to the OST field. Any questions before I have Mark share a little bit more around the Racial Equity Conference?
Meeting you had yesterday. Do you have a slide or was there a presentation?
Sure.
More information about? So you said, because I don't remember getting any of that information. Deborah told me about it a little Monday, Tuesday actually. What was the name of the meeting? The grantee?
It was an optional, I think we called it the first grantee convening.
Grantee.
So there were anyone who received money through United Way was invited to attend.
Yeah. And that meeting lasted how long?
It was yesterday from 9:30 to 12 o'clock.
Okay.
No, it was not sent to commission. It was only sent to grantees. It was not sent to the commissioners. It was something we did just based off of learnings from United Way and wanted to make sure they were set for summer, and so we made it optional. Shared more around how to understand the sale, the support we provide related to the sale, to the quality work, what the commission is doing. So we shared the strategic plan and sort of where the grants are and the idea of the cohorts, because we in continuation, and some of that they did not know. So we wanted to make sure we had a convene to share some of the work that has been happening, that they were not understanding what was happening on a big system level. So we got a lot of positive response in sharing that information with the CBOs and a lot of their feedback as we think about what's accountability, what's the outcome. So a lot of comments. Actually, I think the outcomes committee may be a little bit more robust next time. Even more people are interested in thinking about outcomes and accountability.
Any other questions?
Me? So Myla asked me to speak a little bit about our experience last week. Myla and I went out to Minneapolis and attended a 2-day training with the Racial Equity Institute.
Yeah, sorry.
Oh, okay. It's like, why are you walking behind me? What's happening? The Racial Equity Institute does a variety of trainings to try to help individuals and groups to understand the forces of racism and structural oppression. Largely their phase 1 training, which is what we did, is focused on providing the historical context of racism in our country, the invention of whiteness and the use of it as a weapon and the creation of systems. I don't know that Myla or I thought pedagogically it was the most incredible training we'd ever gone to. We spent about 7.5 of 8 hours both days sitting and listening. Yeah, you're telling me. But the content, I actually do think the content's really interesting. They go through a full history of America, sort of explaining how whiteness was invented, defined, and used, and sort of the repercussions of those decisions. Myla and I both talked about how interesting it would be to be able to create a similar timeline that's DC specific, because this city has a unique history in some ways, sort of couched in the history of our country. So I definitely walked away with some interesting learnings. I appreciate that I was invited to go. I've done some similar trainings from other organizations, so it was interesting to see REI's approach versus the People's Institute, for example, which I've also done. I think the framework that was probably most helpful, just to give sort of one highlight, is we spent a lot of time talking about, they used a metaphor at the beginning, saying if you went by a lake and you saw a fish floating there, belly up, you'd wonder what happened to the fish. But if you went by the lake and you saw 50 fish floating belly up, you'd wonder what happened. Sorry, the first one you wonder what happened to the fish. The second one you'd wonder what happened to the lake. And then we extended that metaphor and got into, if you try to fix the lake, but the problem keeps coming back, you'd wonder what happened to the groundwater. And sort of looking at interventions at all of those levels to figure out how can we, as systems builders, get to the groundwater level rather than focusing on the fish level when the fish are going to keep getting sick if we don't fix the lake and the groundwater. So I thought that metaphor was at least interesting, so I thought I'd share that. Happy to answer any questions you guys have. We did get a digital workbook that outlines some of the history. It's actually interesting, and we're not allowed to share it on social media, but I assume we could share it with this group.
I think I can share it with the commissioners.
Okay.
But I'm going to ask permission first, just because it's a public body, and I'm not sure if they can then release it publicly. So I wanted to get permission from REI, if that's okay.
Yeah. And if anyone's interested, I actually was really intrigued by the idea of doing some digging to create a timeline that's DC specific, and how the history is played out differently. There's a lot of talk about separate but equal in cities, but the way that that still necessitated investment in public infrastructure for the white people to take advantage of, that then people of color could use, and then the divestment from cities when the white people left. And I think in that way, because of DC's history, that experience is probably slightly different here. And I'm sort of interested in how that might have played out. And so if anyone's interested in just talking further about that and doing some digging, I'd be interested, and I think Myla is too.
I'd like to.
Okay.
Any questions? Well, thank you for sharing the experience, and I hope the workbook is something that could be shared. I've attended that training before and had a very similar reaction or experience you had, so great, thank you. Okay, so let's move on to the strategic plan discussion. And so We are going to talk through, it's a document that everybody should have. It says draft and deliberative up at the top, our strategic plan. And so I know at our last meeting, we discussed various elements of this, including, I should say more specifically, the strategic priorities on page 3, starting on page 3. And that's what we're going to hone in on today. The rest of the plan we've deliberated, I think, quite a bit as a body, and so the various committees were tasked with crafting more detail in terms of the goals and the strategies for each of the strategic priorities. And so just in terms of process, the idea is that we'll have a discussion today, and that based on this discussion, and any changes that we might have, then we would have a public vote at our August meeting. And so ideally, we do want to get to a point of, I think, near final today, so that we can make the document publicly available in time for the August meeting. So I don't think we had a strong vision for how we would walk through the document, so I think we should just kind of start at the beginning, the top of the strategic priorities on page 3. And maybe we can go section by section, see if there's any comments or questions. And I would encourage if any of the commissioners that were on the subcommittees that were part of the discussion, if you want to add additional context, I encourage you to do so. So let's start with the funding and capacity building. Okay, great. Deborah was just letting me know that Gary, you're the co-chair for that committee. So I don't know if you have any context or anything you want to add for the purposes of this discussion.
First, you want me just read through it?
I don't think we need to read through it. So if there's anything that based on the subcommittee's conversations that you think would be important, perhaps you deliberated over. Should we say small nonprofits or low capacity nonprofits or whatever. If you wanted to share that context, that would be helpful, but I don't think we need to read it.
Okay. Well, I don't have any comments with regard to it right now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any commissioners have any thoughts or comments? Folks on the phone, you should feel free to jump in if you have something to add.
And I think one thing I will just highlight that you may notice from last time this came out to where it is today is that the comments around youth voice and the large number of discussions that this committee had around youth voice, and it was it's something they still value and see, but realistically did not see anything happening within the next 3 years. That there's still a need for the infrastructure and thought around capacity building and funding, that at this time there wasn't a space yet for youth voice. But it would be used throughout, and that youth voice really supporting the idea around the quality committee's work and seeing where it fit best. But this committee dealt a lot with the youth voice piece. And so if you looked at previous versions of this to where it is today, that one, the committee thoughtfully had a really thoughtful discussion around and landed in place in the next 3 years, the strategic plan. Can we do something there? Will it be effective? And they had decided to put that off, but recognize that it is still a value of the commission, that it will not get lost in all of the work.
So Marla, are you speaking about youth voice in general or specific to the funding and capacity
The funding
building?
and capacity building.
Okay. And so the thought of the committee was that youth voice or incorporating youth voice into the work is a form of organizational capacity?
So not so much that they were looking at how do you put youth voice into funding, like in making decisions and or from for supporting capacity building.
Okay.
Right? How do you incorporate the youth voice into those aspects? They kept wrestling with this idea for a really long time because they value youth voice, but every time we would get to a roadblock and realize the number of infrastructure needed if you really wanted to execute youth voice in philanthropy or capacity building became a challenge. Like, we needed to support the youth in a way that this committee wasn't ready for. That
I would just add that I remember from our discussion last time, there was a general feeling that the committees are going to have to work together, especially this one. And I see that definitely comes up in quality. I know in some of the tools we use already, but some of the stuff that gets talked about in outcomes, youth voice is brought in those areas. So if that information is then going to funding and capacity building, there's stepping stones there to eventually having something as part of the funding and capacity building committee.
Okay. Well, thanks. Let's move on to the next section, or the next strategic priority, which is quality. And can you remind me who the chair is of that committee?
that we
Okay. So, if there's anyone who participated in any of those committee conversations would like to, again, provide some context?
Commissioner Berkey can.
I don't know what type of context.
Anything that you think would be helpful?
I do think we're excited. I mean, following up on the conversation about youth voice, I think one of the things that excited our committee most was the idea of building a youth assessor corps to be able to go out and actively engage in program assessments, and just as a way of youth to help youth be more invested in the quality of programming as well. And then, I mean, we did a lot of refinement of the plan at the last meeting, and I thought, you know, it was, I think we're getting to a really good place. I mean, I think we feel pretty good about where we are at the moment, but yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments about the quality strategic priority? Okay, we can move on to outcomes.
That one's me.
Okay. Great.
And is also involved. So you weren't at the last one, right?
Yeah.
At our last meeting, we spent more time on the tactics than on stuff, so I feel like it's relatively stable since last time. But yeah, it's we talked last time about sort of the three buckets we have here. So we're looking at the system, organizational, and program levels,
Right.
and then trying to play a role in making sure that whatever comes out of the needs assessments when they happen, something comes from that. But I didn't feel like there were dramatic changes to these things.
Any additional comments or questions? Okay, we can move on to the final strategic priority, coordination and collaboration.
Ask Aurora, since my name's not on here.
Oh, Aurora?
Uh-huh.
Did you want to add or provide any context on the coordination and collaboration goals and strategies that would be helpful for the commission as we consider finalizing these?
I don't really have anything to add other than what's there. I know Dallas is helping facilitate our group too. I'm not sure if he has any thoughts, but
I wasn't at the last meeting.
Okay.
So this
oh yeah, sorry, Jeremy, about that. Sorry.
No, that's okay. I just wanted to give folks an opportunity to speak on behalf of the work that their committees are doing, so that's fine.
Return the phone.
I
This one, the last one we had at the library, on Main Street.
The one on K?
Yeah. No, you weren't there.
Wait, this wasn't the one at Raymond? No, that was the last one before.
Yeah.
And this
This
is not
can-
the library or the library?
No, it was the library, main library.
I'm sorry.
For this committee, they focused a lot really on the timeline and successes and targets. I think the big thing is that a lot of the successes and targets, they will work with the outcomes committee and thinking through some of the, like, how do you actually measure partnership? And a lot of these are also deliverables. So there are no targets because they will have actually something physical and tangible to produce. So they didn't actually put targets on everything. But this committee is much further ahead in thinking through and really wants to start diving into what are some of the implementation and what that looks like over the next several months.
So any comments or questions about this section, coordination and collaboration?
Just to understand, in August, this is the document that we want to be able to approve?
Yes. Yep. It will look much prettier. So we have a draft pretty version of the strategic plan. What you're seeing is the text. So will the public understand the text? We'll have pictures and some other stuff to make it look pretty. Alex is working on that, but we wanted to make sure this is the plan for the next 3 years. This is what will be published on the website. When say, what's the strategic plan? This will be published, and then the work plan is what your working document is. So this gets updated annually, monthly, as the committees start to really do the work.
So it sounds like, since there's not a lot of comments and feedback, which I'd say is good, because we're moving to a place of finalization, so it means that the committees have been working hard, and I think it takes a lot to get to a place where you take some of these more abstract ideas and put some goals and specific strategies behind them. So I think the fact that there isn't a lot of deliberation just shows that the committees have been working really hard and produced some really good work. So with that, I think we're in a good place to finalize this document for the public vote in August.
Okay, so we'll make a notice of that there's a vote for the next commission meeting, so the public knows if they want to have any comments related to this. I mean, they can comment today, but in general, this is the published document.
Sorry, can I make one comment?
Yeah, sure.
More of a question. I just, this has been a tricky week in the out-of-school time world in DC.
Yes.
I'm sorry for arriving late. I don't know if there was any discussion in regard to that, but I just wonder, the public now has a very specific issue in mind when they think about program quality and program processes and coordination and standards and all this other stuff. And I don't know if I were not more familiar, not as familiar as we all are with this, and if I were just a parent who's had a rough experience, or who's the issues of this week have put in the spotlight some issues about how organizations work together in the city and how processes work and all of that. I don't know if I'm seeing where issues like that and the need to better improve those kinds of things fall in this rubric. I mean, and that's just an open question. Like, if you were reading this, where would you say that's going to land? Like, or this committee's, do we have anything to do with that?
Yeah,
I don't know.
so I mean, I can answer
Can you
that.
add more context, please?
How much more context? I mean, that's what we need to know, is how much are we adding to this?
But
I think
you're
we're
asking
using
for context
So
about
this
the
week-
for the
situation.
question. Okay.
Sorry, this week it was revealed that an organization that operates after-school programming at multiple schools throughout the city has not been following proper procedures with regard to licensure and the screening of its employees for background checks. And there was an incident that involved one of its young employees with a young student. And so, there's a petition online, and there's all kinds of stuff, and a lot of, it's been in the news. And I just think that, it raises the whole after-school thing in a different way, So we're thinking about quality in terms of how great is the engagement between the, participants and their their providers, and parents are thinking, please don't have an incident with my child. So I just don't know where does that fit here?
Yeah, so that fits under the Coordination and Collaboration Committee, and actually the actual clearance process has come up in one of the thinking about streamlined processes, and where could be thinking about. So if you look on, we don't have page numbers, but on the one, under the review and improve process requirements, under Coordination and Collaboration. So
You're talking about the work plan?
Yeah, if you open up the work plan, we actually have something listed in there. It says review CBO staff volunteer clearance requirements between the OST office, OSSI, DPR, DCPL, DOES, DCPS, DCHA, and DHS to understand who needs to know what, when, and how frequently is updated, cost, timeline, in any areas to reduce duplication, streamline background checks.
Okay.
How's that?
So if a parent gets beyond this
Yep.
to this, then they're gonna see where we're working on those kinds of things.
Correct.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And that is part of the screening that we do of grantees, correct?
Yeah, so for grantees, so in particular, I can share our grantee process. Grantees are required for both volunteer and staff. So actually in any administration, so anyone who has direct contact with kids are required to have MPD fingerprint background checks, MPD background checks, the National Sex Offender Registry, CFSA Child Protection Registry check, and then in some cases, I already said that, that was number one, FBI fingerprint. And then if they are programming at DCPS, they have a TB test as well, and that's required from working at DCPS. So it meets the requirement for DC law. And then we also have a process, and so all of the nonprofits, their employees, they make determinations and determine suitability of the employee to work with kids. If we, through United Way, who does our compliance check, find somebody, or if the partner agency, the sub-grantee, wants the district to make the determination because something did show up, we have a process and an MOU with DCHR so the district can make the determination on behalf of our sub-grantee so that they are never in a position where they think they made the right decision. So we have a new agreement, so we cover all costs for our grantees so that they can just share with us. And that bypasses United Way, so there's some confidentiality there until the district makes and determines the ability for that volunteer or staff to be working directly with kids.
Any other questions or comments?
To Commissioner Berkey's point, do you think, because I'm actually reading this, I don't think the word safety shows up in any one of these buckets. And I think we would all probably argue that the intent is there, but would it make sense to be explicit and insert that into the
So we put it under quality, expression of voice and choice by providing safe and supportive environments. Do you want something more explicit?
Safe and supportive. Got it.
Page 3.
Yeah.
Maybe it should go under the coordination and collaboration then as well, like review and improve process requirements for program compliance and safety or something like that, or I don't know what or the various dimensions that will address.
Do you have a specific language to change though, as opposed to add? I mean, the commission on here, or are you talking about adding it to it?
No, I'm just saying the bullet that has the review and improve process requirements, which I think you indicated was tied to the more.
Okay, so you're talking about the work plan.
In the work plan, you have more
Sorry.
explicit detail about
Yep.
this, but in the
Strategic plan on page
strategic
4.
plan,
Yeah.
you just have that bullet that says review and improve process requirements for the coordination and collaboration strategy. I'm just saying maybe it should have a few more words attached to it that associate it with, like, I don't know, review and improve process requirements for safety and, what did I say, really, like, compliance or
Yeah.
something like that.
So if you read I think we're changing though what the strategy is. a
Right,
little
so
bit
maybe,
by
I don't want to
adding
do that, I'm just saying, maybe there's a better way to do
Yeah,
that.
so the 4 tactics, when they talk about review and improve process requirements, one is overall, they're trying to look at support the agency and nonprofit operations. So it's looking at the clearances, it's looking at across government agencies and CBOs, like who and how they can work together, mapping some of the enrollment forms across the different agencies, and if possible, looking at common applications for youth enrollment across OST programs, permit sharing of youth information. So that's sort of where they're looking at, where clearances is just one of the tactics under all things around improving process requirements.
Maybe one suggestion is up in the general description of that strategy, or the strategic priority, we could add safe. So to build a strong, safe, and sustainable system. therefore it kind of more generically captures the intent around safety and how that may pertain to the various goals and tactics.
But I don't think the system needs to be
Needs to be
safe.
safe.
It's the, like,
The
right, we're talking about
organizations.
youth.
So
To
they
build
need
us-
high quality and safe OST programs, or rather than the system that supports high quality.
Well, if under quality, and this is just being, driving at the word choice here, but if under quality we're saying a safe and supportive environment,
That's
and then
just
later we're saying high quality, and we're
It's
defining
right.
quality as being safe,
Exactly.
then I think it's fair.
It's okay.
I understand your
Okay.
concern. I think it's legitimate. I think that it's here, and it is definitely in the work plan, whether it's in this document is the question. But I think if any of us were asked the question, we would be able to answer it.
Talk about it, right?
Thank you for
Okay.
bringing that up. So I think it's a very current example and a good way to pressure test the thinking that's going into the strategic plan, so thank you. Okay. All right, so I think we're still in a place where we agreed we're gonna move forward with the strategic plan draft as is and finalize that for the August vote. Okay, so the next item of business is the standing meeting updates. So we had a governance committee update, and you have to excuse me because I have the notes from that on my phone here. So we met back in May, and the principal question that we were discussing was whether or not we should consider a move for the out-of-school time office from the Office of the Deputy Mayor for Education. And so I think this is something that has come up, maybe in, I can't remember the context, if it was in city council meetings and other situations about whether or not the Deputy Mayor's Office for Education is the right home for the Office of out-of-school time grants and youth outcomes. And so we talked about that and decided that now is not necessarily the right time for us to be making this decision or a recommendation, that we're still kind of getting established and developing processes and procedures for the office, and that this might be something that would be better taken up once we have a little bit more experience as an entity under our belts. Let's see. So we discussed what the funding implications might be if the office was housed in a different place within the city government structure, whether or not there was urgency for a potential move. We didn't really see it as being something that was urgent. We discussed kind of the system impact and thought that a move might possibly have a negative impact in terms of some of the data sharing agreements that are in place. And we did consider some of the optics and political aspects of being kind of housed again with the in the mayor's office. But again, we decided that for right now, where the office is located makes a lot of sense, and we didn't really see a need to bring any further consideration to the question. So, Myla or Aurora, do you want to add in? Do you have anything to add in the discussion?
I would just add that it doesn't, the discussion didn't, this is more of an immediate short-term discussion, and so this doesn't change reconsidering this question, semi-regularly. But I think just looking at the sort of list we came up with of pros and cons and things, it felt that stability and kind of consistency and trust building still kind of won the day for the moment. And so change is always kind of the harder option there. But how that weighs on the scale of things as time passes is definitely the kind of math that could change. So it's definitely not something that we're deciding the long-term picture, but for the short term, that was the math we did.
Great, thank you. The only other thing to update from there is that we did talk about sending a letter to the City Council's Education Committee chairpersons just to let them know that this is something that we've discussed and where we've landed on that. And so the letter would come from the governance committee and not the commission as a whole. Is that right? Any questions, comments? Okay. All right. Commissioner Holland, do you want to give an update on the needs assessment committee?
Sure. So everybody should have a printout of an outline, just one page within our materials. Report out to the needs assessment committee. So just quickly before getting into this, at our last meeting, we talked a little bit about getting more granular in our data collection efforts and sort of moving beyond wards as being the boundaries by which we approach gathering data and needs assessment. And we talked a little bit about ANCs versus neighborhood clusters. So Jeremy and the team at the OST office did a little digging with the Office of Planning just to kind of get more background on how did the Office of Planning come up with neighborhood clusters, and it was through direct engagement with residents and you know, where you're able to identify very real characteristics from one neighborhood to the next, you know, even within the same ward. So that is starting to look like the most likely unit that we would use, but just wanted to provide that update there. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Jeremy. Cool.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Sure.
So is it a concern that looking at the assessment from a ward basis would what would be the the impact of that? The
concern was that it just didn't tell as clear a picture, or didn't paint as clear a picture as it possibly could, like because the wards are just so dynamic.
Yeah.
And you know, Ward 7, it can be broken down in so many different ways, and
Sure.
you know, you can't just paint it with one broad brush. And so that's kind of the intent, is like, how do we make sure that as we are gathering information from parents, from young people, and assessing programs, that you know, we're doing so in the context of what is actually needed and what is reflective of what's going on in neighborhoods, and not just by broad characterizations of wards. So does that make sense? Okay. And then so the other piece for that's connected to the handout that you have is that one of our main goal as a committee is really to help set a broad scope for the needs assessment that occur each fiscal year. And we, you know, kicked around several ideas of topics that could be potential areas of focus. And I took some time to really distill some of the top ones down into a basic outline that you have here. So there's basically 5 areas of focus that we have discussed over our last 2 committee meetings. And then I'll just go through them really quickly. I'm not going to read the doc, but just a couple highlights. So unique populations, you know, we have data from previous assessments about, you know, how many slots there are universally, how many, what is sort of the need from an at-risk standpoint by ward, but we could go one level down or 1 or 2 levels down, and just trying to get a sense of whether OST programming is supporting, you know, other subpopulations that may not get the attention that they need, like young people with disabilities or, you know, things of that nature. So would be interesting to get some more information from a needs assessment about that. So who exactly is being served. And then organizational overhead and funding. I'm sure this probably will overlap with some of the other committees that are engaged in work, but just, you know, thinking about the 10% overhead cap that providers are subject to, and sort of is that limiting potential for programming options and just the overall OST landscape throughout the city. And then Another topic was program supply, supply and demand, and sort of, yeah, we know how many slots exist per ward, but are the programs that count for those slots actually matching the demands from families and young people? So we may have slots that are there, but like, are they offering the type of programming that youth actually want, that our families are seeking? So, so just more information in that context. And then another piece, a big piece, was transportation and geography. We talk so much in sort of the out of school time space about how transportation impacts attendance, enrollment, programming offered, etc. And but I think a lot of our information is sometimes anecdotal, and we need more information there. What is actually driving young people's decisions to attend specific programming versus another? How does a parent's commute factor into what their child gets enrolled in? If they've got multiple children, could co-location become a factor if we're being more strategic about where programming is located based on age group, etc. And then lastly, just perspective from families and teens. I think this is pretty straightforward, just trying to get a better sense from families and young people what they want. So, so those are the 5 topics. Commissioner Garrido, Commissioner Hill, and Commissioner Hickey were present at our last couple of meetings. I don't know if you guys have anything to add there, or any comments. I'm happy to take questions from folks.
I have a question.
Sure.
So in thinking about the needs assessment, did the committee discuss the distinction between the school year versus summer programming and how needs might vary across the timing of the program offering, or?
We didn't go like super deep there. I mean, very casual references to it, but we didn't spend a lot of time there. And I guess I should also say, in order for us to get to the point where the office really has its marching orders for how to sort of bid out and structure the research that'll occur in 2020,
right.
We as a commission need to really prioritize what we think next year's needs assessment will focus on. So based on the work that our committee has been doing, we see these 5 as really strong areas to dig deeper in. And I think we have. Do we have an opportunity for? There you go. See.
I emailed the link to all of the commissioners. So you don't have to type it in your phone. If you want to open up your email, it should be in your box. So the poll for you to go ahead and.
That's why I love you. Yeah. So, you've got the sub bullets here. I just kind of did a brief explanation of what we were thinking, but I wanted to make sure we got some feedback from the full commission on how folks would rank these 5. And then, if you're wondering about, things that are not on this list, there'll be another option for us to input things that, you think we may have missed, that warrant that kind of attention.
So in terms of giving the direction that's needed for the to move forward with the research in 2020, does this commission need to make? Is there like an action that we need to take, or is it just that you're just updating us and we're giving you input and your committee is providing that direction?
I see it kind of the other way, where I see the committee as doing more deeper research and thinking, and then presenting ideas to the commission for full approval. And then when that approval, I mean, ideally that would be, I guess, based on the rankings that we do and the input that we gather from folks here, my intent is that we would take a formal vote at the next meeting.
In August. Okay.
And then once that formal vote is then the office can run with that guidance.
Okay.
You can go back to that link. Or actually, it's at the top underneath the header. So if you just type in that URL on your phone, you can cast your your vote for how you would rank these 5?
So you have to click on the title and then use the arrows to move it up or down.
On the phone, do you have
Just
those?
the one question.
Yes, it's a one question.
Yeah, I've got it. Thanks, Myla.
Did you guys talk at all? Do you imagine that if you focus on certain ones of these in FY20, that others would be considered in future years?
I mean, I'd imagine that would be a natural progression, right? I mean, I think everyone here is 3-year terms, right? So I don't think anyone here is termed out. So the same conversation will continue next year as we would be planning for 2021. So yeah, that's highly plausible.
Is everyone done?
I am not.
You tell me when you want to lock it. The folks on the phone, have you had a chance to provide your ranking?
Yeah. This is Valerie. I submitted.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Has everybody had a chance to submit? Raise your hand if you have not.
I'm still.
Sorry.
Your time. It's a thoughtful process here.
It is.
Done. Emily is submitting these.
Oh, good.
I think I'm done.
All right. We'll move it.
We're locking it.
Let's go ahead and lock it.
Wait, I don't know where my mouse is. Hold on. Okay. That's your response. You ready for the next one?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, I forgot to clear out the results from before. Just ignore those
Yeah.
test questions.
So this is really basic. This is just like, you've got 5 areas of focus in front of you. If you think something is missing that the needs assessment in 2020 really should be digging into, this is a chance to just enter that in as feedback and something to be considered before we actually take a formal vote next month. So if you got a topic you want to put on the table, you can put it here. If not, fine, but just wanted to make sure that opportunity was there. All right, everybody good? Raise your hand if you need more time.
As you hit enter, submit, it should show up. So give them computer a minute here.
I don't see people typing.
Yeah, I don't think, I think people may be good, but
Even if you say nothing to add, just for fun.
yeah, let's just make sure it works. Did somebody write nothing to add?
We just cleared up the responses from before.
Okay. That's it for my update.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. That looks like you guys did really good work. Okay. Well, that brings our meeting to a close. So our next date is August 8th from 6:30 to 8.
Is there any additional business or comments that we need to discuss? All right, would somebody like to motion for adjournment?
Motion to adjourn. Second.
Okay, all who approve the adjournment, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, the motion carries unanimously. All right, thanks, everybody. Oh, it is 7:30.
You're welcome. Thanks, guys.
Yep, thank you, everybody.
Have a good evening. Yeah, bye-bye.
See you. Bye-bye.
Actually,
Yeah, yeah.